If you only knew the power of one, the power of two, the power of many.
On this week's episode of The Acolyte, I don't care what happens, because I am on vacation. I am off to Mount Rushmore to find hidden gold that is definitely not mine, but hey, it's up for the grabs. Does that make me a terrible person? Quite possibly, but at least I'm ranking up there with the likes like Jack Sparrow. In any case, The Acolyte sucks. We've already gone through 7 episodes of this, and I am not going to worry about it whatsoever on my vacation. However, I am going to have a look at how George Lucas did manage to pull off a pretty fair representation of a magical space law enforcement organization encapsulated in the Jedi. And see, well, what can we possibly learn from actual logic in your writing? Hi there, everyone. Lars here from Camille's Harem. Not just a podcast for novice writers by novice writers, but also a YouTube channel by novice writers for novice writers. Because writing is an adventure, it's more fun with friends. And to set the stage for this right here, let's just have a quick peek back at what old Obi-Wan told Luke back in A New Hope.
Elegant weapon for a more civilized age. For over 1,000 generations, the Jedi Knights were the guardians of peace and justice in the Old Republic, before the Empire.
So the Jedi were the guardians of peace and justice in the Old Republic. And as Mace Windu also reminds Palpatine,
we're keepers of the peace, not soldiers.
So there you have it. The Jedi are the guardians of peace, justice in the galaxy. They are not soldiers. And it's really easy to forget this because we've gotten so much of the Clone Wars. And you know what? The Clone Wars are really awesome, and it's cool to see the Jedi really living up to that tradition of warrior monks, of seeing them grow into their roles as military leaders, and really taking a role of prominence within the galaxy. However, doing so does expose their hubris and sets them up to fail when Palpatine undermines them all with Order 66. So that is all actually really good basic setup for a fantastic story. George Lucas, despite all of his faults in retconning some rather important elements between the prequel trilogy and the original trilogy, at least he understood how to set up a basic plot and execute it with minimal contradictions, as opposed to the atrocity that is The Acolyte. Now, let's take a moment to see what exactly these Guardians of Peace and Justice do. We know that the Jedi Order does exist separate of the Galactic Senate. They are meant to be autonomous, and one of the reasons why people trust them to do that is because of their lifestyle. By cutting themselves off from all attachments to the rest of the galaxy and focusing on inner peace and balance within the Force, the Jedi can be largely trusted with taking care of the galaxy and of policing themselves. This is where the Acolyte could have been really great in showing how the Jedi had failed to do that in one particular circumstance. However, again, because of all of the constant contradictions within the basic script for the Acolyte, any real moment to show that is just completely eviscerated, destroyed, and basically forgotten by the creators themselves. They were more interested in setting up shipping moments and what they thought were cool gotcha moments and cool moments of look at our amazing magical space switches, rather than focusing on what the show should have always been about, a murder mystery that exposes the corruption within the Jedi Order. But we don't really get any of that. Even when we get the truth of what happened back in Episode 7, it's a truth that doesn't make the Jedi look corrupt, it makes them look incompetent. Which then, when you see what the Jedi are like in the prequel trilogy, you're like, hey, you know what, they're all good. Yoda and Mace Windu absolutely cleaned shop and made the Jedi the awesome warrior monks that we all know and love. So why does the Acolyte really matter then, unless it just leads to this in the best way possible? Well, in any case, We understand that the Jedi are meant to police themselves, and this does actually set them up again for their own hubris and fall within the prequel trilogy, because there's really no one there to really challenge them. However, even though they exist as a body apart, they work in close connection with the Senate. The Senate, trying to keep all of these thousands of planets together in any kind of unified body throughout the galaxy, is incredibly difficult. And there are times like what we see in episode 1 of Star Wars Phantom Menace, that sometimes one planet says, you know what, screw it all, it's better for us to blockade another planet, or to invade another planet, or to just do something scummy, because that works out really well for us, and for our allies it's a great thing. If one planet just happens to be weaker than the others, then why not take advantage of them? The Jedi are then asked to intercede, to use diplomacy first and foremost, and then if diplomacy doesn't work, they can apply pressure. Thanks to their powers of the Force, they can understand people way better, and they realize what is going to help nudge them in the right direction. But should things get hairy, they can then whip out their lightsabers and then take these other people to task. And because the Jedi have a monopoly on the Force, this allows them to really subdue most enemies with a whole lot of ease. It's a big deal in episode 2, Attack of the Clones, that the Jedi have to come in such massive force in order to suppress the rebellion that is on the planet of Geonosis. Now there's your basic structure. We then get to see, actually, in Attack of the Clones, what Jedi will do when they're not just simply on a diplomatic mission, where they're asked to help to intercede and to mediate. And it would have been great to actually see the Jedi really showing off their own mediation skills, improving themselves to be really great politicians in their own right. They don't consider themselves politicians because they try to separate themselves from the rest of the galaxy, but they are effectively used as political tools in order to keep peace within the galaxy. But we do get to see, thanks to Obi-Wan, the investigative skills that the Jedi are supposed to use, where they search, they question, they gather evidence, they have that evidence analyzed, they rely on logs, on libraries, on every kind of bit of evidence, of resource that they can possibly get their hands on in order to catch their man. If they are asked to solve a murder, or to solve an assassination plot, or to possibly solve what's going to happen with one planet trying to undermine another planet economically. You can read in the extended universe books, you can find all of these fantastic examples of when the Jedi basically had to be cops and detectives. We really don't get any of that within the Acolyte, and in large part that's because the writers really don't understand what cops do beyond that they just patrol the beat. No, cops are trained to do quite a bit, and even though the news sensationalizes a lot of the bad stuff that happens with cops, and let's not get into all of that political fare, for anyone who's actually ever tried to become a police officer, you'll realize that not only do you have to go through an intense physical exam, but there's also a lot that is required of you to know about the law, about how to deal with people, to de-escalate a scene, to gather evidence, and to help secure a scene so that way far better specialists can then show up and secure what is needed in order to solve any sort of crime that has been committed. In short, then, the Jedi aren't just simply taught how to wield a lightsaber and how to meditate. That would actually be super easy. You don't need to put any sort of Padawan through 15 years worth of training in order to get that all down. In fact, that would only take a couple of years. Instead, the lengthy process of being a Jedi Padawan and then becoming a Jedi Knight and then living as a Jedi Knight before you can even be raised to the rank of Master is that you are meant to gain experience in dealing with people and cultures, figuring out how best to mediate peace and justice without resulting to using your lightsaber or forcing people to do anything with your connection to the Force. And for all of the faults that we can easily admit that the Star Wars prequel trilogy has, one of the things that's hard to find fault with is how the Jedi are portrayed with having an incredible knowledge of the Force, an incredible knowledge of cultures, of planets, and of what resources they have at their disposal in order to suppress crime and promote peace. One of the reasons why the Separatist movement in Attack of the Clones is such a big deal is because it is such a widespread movement that the Jedi do not have the numbers necessary to address all of these individual planets on an individual basis and try to bring them back into the fold of the Galactic Senate. This divide then is capitalized on by Darth Sidious and by Count Dooku, or Darth Tyrannus, in order to create the civil war that will sweep the whole galaxy. And that's then how we really dive into the Clone Wars in the most briefest way of explaining it. Now, to pump the brakes on this, what can we as authors learn from this process and from the deviation between George Lucas's prequel series, which shows Jedi being actual law enforcers, keepers of the peace, guardians of justice throughout the galaxy, and pretty competent investigators, as opposed to the absolute dredges and horrors that we see in the Acolyte? Well, what I would highly recommend to all of my fellow authors is this. If you don't understand how any profession, not just simply how cops, but any profession operates, go and do your research. One of the best ways you can do your research is find out, well, who has those jobs? And let me tell you something. People are willing and happy to talk about the jobs that they have, the good and the bad. And it's actually really easy to go up to any officer and set up, hey, you know what? I'm doing some research. I'm working on a book. I want to know more about what it's like to be a cop, what it's like to be an investigator. Can I talk to you? Is there someone I can talk to? And the police department very often is like, yeah, sure. We'll set that up. We love to talk. And that goes for working with firefighters or nurses or engineers, programmers, people who worked bagging your groceries. Oh, they definitely want to talk to you. Let me tell you that. So go out and talk to people, gather information through interviews, and please do your own research. It's really not all that difficult. Yes, it takes time. It will slow down the creative process. But trust me, the more that you learn, the better your writing will be and the more it will connect with your audience. Because even though people might not be experts on what cops, for instance, do, they've known enough about what a police officer is supposed to and not supposed to do, whether it be through the news or watching shows or because they know someone who is a police officer. And by putting in actual details and procedures that someone in that profession does into a book, like let's say you're working on making Guardians of Peace throughout the galaxy, that will resonate far more with your audience. They will be able to connect with it and understand it better. So please, please, please do your research while I go hunt for gold at the back of Mount Rushmore. Woohoo! Happy vacation, y'all. Happy summer. And no, I am not doing a proper review or analysis for The Acolyte Episode 8 because I know it's going to be garbage. What I will be doing is when I get back from vacation, I am going to do a solid breakdown of all the things that the Acolyte did wrong and try to expose that to you, my fellow novice authors, so that way you can see not just what they did wrong, but how it can be done right. Because it's not just simply enough to say, yeah, whatever they did, do the opposite. No, when you actually learn what should be done, it will help your writing out tremendously. So I shall dedicate myself to that horrible project for the good of all. But in the meantime, if you're looking for more reviews, analyses, or book recommendations, then please check out our other videos here, or check out the books that we've published. Links for them are in the description below. And until the next video, y'all, hopefully you are not torturing yourself with the Acolyte, and tschüss.